Welcome to Hablemos, escritoras. This is our episode 700, and we are celebrating with the presentation of a great book, When My Body Ceased to Be Your Home. This is a co-edition with Literal Publishing. The book, by Emma Sepúlveda, a renowned author, and translated by Denise Kripper, is one of the most important books that you have read these days. Today, we invited three very important people for our project. Rosemary Salum, Literal Publishing Director, Patricia Gras, activist and writer, and Tanya Huntington, translator and poet. I want to take the opportunity to thank the Iraq Award by the Chilean government, who gave the funding for the translation of this book. Also, I want to thank Hablemos Escritoras team. They have done an amazing job to promote this book and all the advertising campaign. The book is available in Amazon, Literal Publishing, and Hablemos Escritoras website. The digital version is coming soon, as well as the audiobook. I am Adriana Pacheco, and I am sure that you will enjoy this powerful conversation. Come and celebrate with us. When My Body Ceased to Be Your Home. Okay, so today is a big day. I am so happy. And this, just looking at all these faces in all these different countries, makes me feel like this is worthy. I can really do this again and again because it is fantastic when I have these guests, these amazing women, and all the work that is behind a book and a translation. So welcome, we are Hablemos Escritoras. Today talking from Barcelona, which is really, really nice. And on behalf of Hablemos Escritoras, we are truly proud to present today When My Body Ceased to Be Your Home by Emma Sepúlveda, an amazing writer, Chilean writer, and the translator, the beautiful and amazing Denise Kripper. Thank you. This project has been so a meaningful conversation and collaboration for months, for years, with Rosemary Salum from Literal Publishing. I am so happy that now we have Rosemary here with us. And Rosemary and I, we invited two wonderful guests to join our conversation. We have today this researcher, documentarian, and activist, Patricia Gras. She's from Argentina, and today is also in Spain. And we have also a translator and a beautiful poet, writer, Tanya Huntington from the United States. She lives in Mexico. And as many of you know, this English translation from Spanish to English by Denise Kripper was made with the money that the Iraq Award from the Chilean government gave us. So we won the Iraq Award to translate this book, and I think that without their support, we couldn't do it. The Iraq Award recognizes the importance of bringing stories like this to these new audiences. The book by Emma Sepúlveda in Spanish was very, very well received. It is a very powerful book. And now it is translated to German, which is very important, especially coming from the German community. So now that we have this book in English, it's going to be a milestone. And we are very, very touched in Hablemos Escritoras that we could make this big adventure. Today is like the worldwide conversation and presentation, and I will let Rosemary that she tell us more about this book, but also about what is being working together. So we are two different projects in the United States, but we have crossed many boundaries, and we have been working for many, many years, decades already. in these efforts. So, Rosemary, so welcome to Hablemos Escritoras today.
Thank you, Adriana. Thank you to everyone that is hearing us or watching us. I want to say that on behalf of Literal Publishing, a 22-year-old publisher house that have published more than 80 titles, we are really thrilled to welcome the English edition of When My Body Ceases to Be Your Home by Emma Sepúlveda and masterfully translated by Denise Kripper. I think that to bring this harrowing yet resilient testimony into English is profoundly important. It allows a much wider international readership to confront one of the darkest chapters of the 20th century in the Americas. In an era when memory and justice still matter deeply, this translation opens the door for global conversations about truth, healing, and the enduring power of women's voices. So Adriana and myself are extremely happy to have such a panel today. And I would like, Tanya to maybe tell us a little bit more about the book and start the conversation.
Good morning or good evening, as the case may be, to everyone. I'm also thrilled to be here and to participate in the launch of this English translation of Emma Sepúlveda's novel, but a novel based on actual events that has to do with a place called Colonia Dignidad. This information comes from the book itself, just to give everyone an idea of the subject matter at hand. When My Body Ceased to Be Your Home delves into the true story of Colonia Dignidad, a Nazi religious cult that settled in Chile for decades with the complicity and support of the German and Chilean governments, and which is known for its human rights abuses during the Pinochet dictatorship. The protagonist of this novel, Ilse, is a woman who managed to survive her horrific imprisonment and escape from the colony, where she endured years of forced labor, gender-based violence, and torture. Through rigorous research, Emma Sepúlveda offers an exploration of abuse and control and honors women's power and resilience. And another quote from above, kind of a blurb for the book, makes this comparison with The Handmaid's Tale, in saying that this is not dystopian fiction, but an actual historical reality. And with that, I'd like to hand the mic over to Patricia Gras.
Thank you, Tanya, and thank you all for being here. Emma, I really enjoyed reading your book. Enjoyed in the sense that it was so well written and so heart-wrenching, and really worth a read for anybody who cares about human rights, women's rights, and the fact that we have to hold people accountable. I want to start by asking you, you created a character, Ilse, who was the main character of the book, tells her story, but why did you decide to write a fiction instead of a nonfiction story? I'm sure I'll ask you about the research process, but I'm assuming that you interviewed a lot of people to get the story right. So share with me why you made the decision to focus on a fictional character to tell the true story of Colonia Dignidad.
Well, first, thank you so much for that question. That's a very interesting approach to the book and the question. I was thinking about writing a history of Colonia Dignidad, but then I started doing the research, and then I found not only a movie that it was done about Colonia Dignidad, but also there were books written about, what happened historically, what was the impact, what happened with the people that came from Germany. And the more that I did the research, the more I realized that nobody really have talked about what happened to the women that were living in Colonia Dignidad, that they were forced to separate their families, to leave everything behind, and they have to live a life of torture. And at that point, I thought, this have to be told in a first person and from the point of view of a little girl, because most of the women that I talked to felt like their life was suspended, that they really didn't live their full life after they arrived in Chile in 1961. So I thought, what a good view of Colonia Dignidad shown by the eyes of this little innocent girl that spends her whole life there, and it could really become the storyteller and then bring the reader close to the pain that she endured.
Now, you're from Chile and Argentina. We lived through military dictatorships, and I'll ask you about the ties between Pinochet and Colonia Dignidad. But what drew you to this? There have been some documentaries, movies. It's been quite a while. We still don't see a lot of justice regarding the people who participated in this, and we are dealing right now in America with the Epstein files. What drew you to this now?
This is sort of a book in my mind, the story in my mind for many, many years. And I think when I live actually in the United States, the last 47 years, I moved to Spain only 3 years ago after I felt like United States was becoming a country very, very similar to the ones that we left behind during dictatorships. So I thought at that point, I really wanted to tell the story of how people live every day by losing more and more freedom, how people live in a sect, because I believe that Colonia Dignidad is not only a concentration camp, but it's also a sect. How people will be brainwashed to believe the word of a leader that is not really a religious leader or political leader for that doesn't even have the principles that these people are make believe that they should hold dear to their heart. So I thought that was one of the reasons. And the other reason is because I started talking more to the victims, and I visit the place in one of my trips to Chile, and I thought, this is the moment to tell the story.
Right, and like I said before, we're living in a very strange times in the United States. We are losing a lot of our rights, our democracy, and I'm wondering why people, English-speaking people, because right now, thank God, the book is in English. Why should they read this?
I think it's important to realize that things could happen not only by accident, but without being informed. And I think living in the United States for so many years, I thought that people really took that freedom for granted. They didn't, for me, to think that my 2 granddaughters were born in the United States and that they will grow up with less freedom that I had when I lived there. So I think this book tells you not only the brutal story of what women lived through 40 years, because they lived there at least 45 years, some of them all their life. They died, some of them there. But also because how the strength of these female characters could fight and they could win against all the odds. So for me, this book is not a tragic story only, but it's also a story of how you could find a way to freedom again. So I hope this will be an inspiration, especially for young people. Do not stop fighting, because even in a concentration camp, women could survive and could find the way to freedom again.
Right. It's definitely a story about empowerment. In the end, she's able to to escape and build a life. Um, right now, like I said, we're living through a time of where the Epstein files and your book and Colonia Dignidad, the people who were perpetrators are not being held accountable. So your book is about empowerment. What can people do, especially women? Because, like you said, the voice of the women were not heard,
Mm-hmm.
still not being heard, at least right now with the Epstein files, right?
Yes, yes.
Let's talk
I
about it.
think, sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. You talked about empowerment, and right now we need an empowerment, right?
Yes. Well, I think first what I learned through the writing of this book and the interviews and the conversations and the research, I do believe that women have some extra strength that it will make us fighters and it will, we will not succumb. We will keep going. I mean, when I look at the migration in the United States, when you look at some of the strength of, Dolores Huerta, I mean, those are all my idols in the United States,
Right,
but
right.
also, in our countries. So I think this is an important story in the sense of women could fight, and the mothers that lost their children in Colonia Dignidad, they never stopped fighting. They were brainwashed, but they knew that they will, if they didn't keep fighting, they will lose everything more than their life and their way of thinking and their freedom. But also this book, it was important to me when I was writing it. I remember the mothers of the disappeared in Argentina remind me of the families of the detained and disappeared in Chile, remind me of the dreamers in United States. I mean, this is a universal story. I think it was one concentration camp in the south of Chile, but writing this book and getting close to these stories, I realized that inner strength that females have. And they have taught me throughout my life and through the writing that I have done that, we can win.
Now, how difficult was it for you? I'm assuming that you interviewed a lot of victims. How difficult was it for you to write this and to live through what these people went through, which was pretty horrible?
I think I will say that this was perhaps the most difficult book that I have ever written. And like I say, I have written about, the mothers of the disappears and, they are pillaristas in Chile and many very, very complicated stories. But this book was more difficult because I always walk a very fine line between fiction and not fiction. I had so much material, I had so many stories to tell that it was very complicated to just put all, and that's what I say at the end of the book. This is the story of many women told in one voice, because it was so painful to listen to these stories. But one of the stories that I have mentioned that before in some interviews, one of the most painful parts was when I talked to a woman that's still there, and she told me that she was better when the perpetrator was alive than she's now. And I thought, well, that's an example of a woman that could never break the change. This is the antagonist, the character in the book, because most women are liberated, more will find the way out. But the pressure that some of these women have gone through, I mean, imagine they were overly medicated, they had 4 surgeries, they were, they use electroshock to, get their behavior to change according to this leader so they can dominate them more. So for me, one of the interviews that I always remember is that painful one that woman could not liberate herself. But that was only one case.
All the other ones gave you hope.
Yes.
As a Chilean and South American, did it make you angrier about what happened with, obviously we haven't talked a little bit about Pinochet's role and his government's role and the German government's role in this Colonia Dignidad. Did it make you more sensitive or angrier about what happened?
I think it's a combination of many, many feelings. First, it was a deep pain that I felt because I have seen so much brutality during, the regimes. And, and my family moved from Argentina to Chile. Then I moved from Chile to United States, and then from United States to Spain. Always, my life had been shaped by political turmoil. So I think I went through, it was almost like seeing my innocence dying, although I have never been very innocent about political turmoil. But it was a sense of frustration. How 8 different uh, gobiernos in Chile have not done anything. How
A German.
yeah, the Germans. I mean, those were people from Germany. Those were children that were being raped. These were women that they were forced to, operate their ovaries and their uterus because they were not supposed to have kids. Women that were physically tortured, hanged by their hands. You know, it was a sense of just so much anger that still, after more than 50 years, nothing has happened. And still, the impunity is what really got me out of shape. And going to Germany to present this book and realize that the doctor, one of the doctors, the young doctor of Colonia Dignidad, is walking free in Germany. And, the woman called him the butcher of
Yeah.
Colonia Dignidad because he basically butchered women. So I think I went through different feelings. And then it was a sense of despair. What can I do? What can I do to help more? So I have even met some victims that live in Europe, Chileans, that they were tortured, as one was 18 years old, 19 years old, when she was torturing Colonia Dignidad during the Pinochet regime. So I'm still really, really anger. I have a strong sense of anger, but also it has made me empower myself to fight more for what I think is right. This book gave me more power, not only as a writer, but as an activist. I mean, I can continue to write about Colonia Dignidad, continue to lecture about Colonia Dignidad. What can we do to find some kind of a justice, or at least, to try to expropriate the area where some of the crimes were committed, so it will be a museum that people could go there and talk about this, so it will never happen again. So I think I'm still going through that anger.
Yeah. Thank you, Emma. And hand this over to Tanya. She has some more questions. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for this book and for the opportunity to discuss some of the subject matter that you deal with in this fictional account, but based on real events. And it occurs to me just to kind of springboard from this illuminating discussion with Patricia that we do see this enormous contrast in the book. And I think fiction is a marvelous way to be able to really enter into intimacy into the minds of people and explore the feeling, the immense contrast between women and others who are deprived of all of their rights, and yet are also forced to receive people who come into. I particularly appreciate the irony of the German delicacies that they would serve and that people would come to enjoy as though it were kind of almost a living museum of traditional German folklore or activities, this facade that was presented to the outside world. I believe that this is also a very timely book because we are seeing so many cases of sects and of organized systems of abuse that are coming to light. Patricia has mentioned Epstein, but just opening the news today, I saw in Canada that there's a urgent movement to prevent the erasure of the testimonies of the residence schools that we only learned about very recently, these infamous boarding schools. Or I think of the case of the Mormon sects, that are coming up again in documentaries. And I think also of this resilience that you've mentioned in terms of when I was teaching Latin American studies back in the day, when we talked about women, it was interesting to see how many movements in Latin America that did achieve social justice, that were able to bring down even the cruelest dictatorships, were women-based movements, no? And I would like to ask you and then perhaps Denise to discuss the point of translation also. Um, Whether you don't see in this sense authorship as a form of activism, no? In the sense that one of the things that were denied to these women, aside from their basic reproductive rights, was the right to read, the right to learn, the right to write. Their letters were confiscated, and so there was severe punishment meted out to those who tried to elaborate any kind of communication. And you come up with the idea of this character who keeps a record in her head and takes pictures in her head because she's forbidden from doing so. And I wondered if you wanted to elaborate on the possibility of fiction as also being a form of activism, as a women's movement, as it were.
Well, I feel that most of my writing has been an extension of my activism. I think living, like I say before, in Chile during some really crucial years at the beginning of the 70s, and then living in United States through some really difficult times, and being an immigrant in United States, it wasn't easy. So I think this book is that. This book is another form of protest. I'm not only telling the story, but I'm also denouncing the people that were responsible for this story. I'm denouncing the man that he was a pedophile. I'm denouncing the fact that little children were stolen from their parents, and they did false adoption papers, Chilean children, so this monster can rape them. So for me, this book means that another step into my activism, and also give the value to those women, because if they didn't really fought, and they didn't try to escape, and they didn't lose their life trying to make changes, Colonia Dignidad probably will still be like it was in the 60s, and the horrible leader will still be committing crimes.
Absolutely. And I feel that it is possible to strike a blow even after the fact, in terms of our memory. And now I'd like to ask you, Denise, because in this sense, I think that making this book available to an English speaking audience, thanks to the support of this grant that enabled the English translation, is crucial because speaking just from a personal perspective, I have a PhD in Latin American literature. I've written numerous books. I've translated dozens of books. I am based in Mexico. I'd never heard of this before, and so I do believe that there is an enormous kind of information gap, and especially in terms of hearing the story from the perspective of the victims, because circling back to these stories that are in the news these days, it never fails to impress me how people fail to ask the victims. I mean, the victims are there, and are able to raise their voice. And so I thank you once again for amplifying these voices and making more visible this situation. And Denise, I wanted to ask you, when this manuscript came into your hands, how aware were you of the story of Colonia Dignidad, or was it a learning experience for you as well?
Yeah, thank you so much, Tanya, for your question, and uh, thank you everyone for being here. I'm like really humbled to be a part of this conversation. I heard of this book from Adriana. She was sort of asking me if I would be at all interested in being part of the project, and from the very beginning, it seemed like such a good fit, at least in principle, just hearing about the idea of this book, because I actually did know about Colonia Dignidad through sort of my personal family history. I'm from Argentina. I come from a Jewish family. So, stories of like Nazis in the south of Argentina. I was very familiar with them. I'm also, regardless of that, particularly interested in histories of cults. I would watch every single documentary that is out there. So I had actually seen a documentary about Colonia Dignidad, and also a fiction, a movie with like Emma Watson and
Hmm.
the German guy from Goodbye Lenin. So I was well aware of Colonia Dignidad. But I told Adriana, in principle, I'm interested. Let me read the book first, right? I wanted to make sure that the book would be a good fit for me as a translator. And I was just sold on the idea of translating this book in the very first page, because even before the book officially starts, there's a one sort of introductory note, not by Ilse, not by Emma, but by another character who's the adoptive daughter of Ilse, also a fictional character, right? You learn this afterwards.
Hmm.
Saying that, she is actually writing this book, and that she's not only writing this book, but also translating the words of Ilse, because of course Ilse speaks German. So this Sarah character is translating Ilse's words into Spanish and writing them. And so this idea of like the multi-layered storytelling and the sort of importance of telling these stories, like the way that this book is sort of set up with this introductory note, sort of sold me on the idea of like, this is an author that is very much engaged with storytelling and with the idea of sort of messages getting to the right people, denouncing, like Emma was just saying, what had happened. So just from the get-go, like that line, like that note really impressed me and made me excited about what I was about to read. And then of course the story is amazing, the prose is amazing. So after finishing the book, I said to Adriana, like, this is a perfect fit.
Hmm.
Yes, I would like to do this. And then I met Emma, and we had a very long Zoom conversation, and it seemed so easy, and we had so many things in common, and so many like I feel like we could have talked for hours. And so that made me just excited to be part of the project, not the book, but like the project of what this book
Hmm.
meant, right? And personally, in the sense of like activism, in that intro note that I mentioned, I myself had to add another line, because of course it wouldn't make sense if I just said, oh, I'm translating into Spanish what Ilse said in German, because the book that everyone will be reading would be in English. So I even had to sort of include myself in that narrative, saying like, and those stories are now being brought to new readers in English. So that sort of added layer of a new audience, a new viewpoint, a new perspective from which these stories will be read. So just everything made sense to me and really clicked in how sort of relevant this book would be for English readers. So I'm just so happy to be here today.
Well, and I'd like to compliment you on your version. I picked up the book and I could not put it down. It just held me. I was captivated. And I'm sure that all of you who are watching, when you acquire this book, when you open it up and read this amazing story that does involve, yes, a lot of violence, a lot of cruelty, but also resilience, also clues as to how, even in the most adverse of circumstances, stories can be preserved, victims can prevail, freedom can be found through perseverance and through storytelling. And I think that the book is a marvelous testament to that, and it's applicable to so many different kinds of situations, but also as a learning experience about Colonia Dignidad, which is Emma mentioned, this sect lasted for 4 decades. And so for me, I don't know, I felt particularly touched by the fact that Ilse is more or less my mother's age, and I thought, what would have happened if this had been my mother's story, and so that empathy that arises from fiction is something that is so wonderful to be able to work with and translate. And I'd like to ask you a question similar, I think, to what Patricia already posed to Emma in terms of translating, because in my own experience, I think perhaps one of the more difficult translations that I was involved with recently had to do with disappearances in Mexico and violence towards journalists, two different books. And in both cases, especially a wonderful book written by Sergio Aguayo and Jacobo Dayan, when I got to the end and I had to translate the lists of personal objects that were found in the mass graves, that was where I had to just step back and take a few days and have a breather, because it just became too much for me. And I wondered, in your process, were you able just to get through the whole book, or did you have to take these breaks and kind of just breathe for a moment at any point?
It was an intense translation process. We had won the Dirac Award, so that meant that my submission deadline had also been moved because publication was going to happen sooner than expected. And I was also pregnant, so I had my own personal deadline going on, which, it was also interesting too, because so much at the heart of this book has to do with family relationships, with mothers and daughters, with what happens when that sort of when those ties are broken, right? And although, yes, there are a lot of instances where the prose gets really hard, and you are bearing witness to some really horrific things, the point of view, and I think Emma also mentioned this, is from a little girl's perspective. Even at the end of the book, when Ilse is already grown up and has managed to leave the colony, and is retelling her story as a survivor, her viewpoint is still very much set in childhood, right?
There's kind of an arrested development, right?
Absolutely. And I think that sort of gave everything a different brightness, a different texture, a different tension, that that was the other thing that I was really sort of drawn to when I first read the book and decided that I wanted to be part of the translation process. I really wanted to try my hand to sort of personify Emma for a few hours a day and try my hand at writing in English those horrific things in the most tender voice and in the most sort of intimate, naive viewpoint that I could explore through my writing. And I just thought that was so well done in the book. It's so difficult to achieve that. And I think that it was perhaps the biggest translation challenge. Like, I remember at the end of the process, Emma was concerned about, like, oh, maybe there's a Chilean expression that, I could help you understand. And there was nothing like that in terms of translation style challenges for me. The process is very clean, but there's something so unassuming about that it's so hard to recreate, right? Because like, you read it and it looks so easy. Everything flows so well. It grabs your attention so well, but there's so much work involved in making it look so easy, right? And so
Yes.
I was just, Ilse's voice and how she's interpreting what she's seeing at an age where she cannot comprehend what she's seeing. And in many ways, because what she's seeing is absolutely beyond comprehension, right? I mean, there is an aspect of age and maturity and development, but also she's witnessing things like no person should ever have to witness. And so I just thought that was so, like, the voice in this book is really, really well done. It's like an exploration of point of view.
Hmm.
Again, very interested in trying my hand at and sort of experimenting with that myself as the translation process moved along. So I learned a lot. I learned a lot about writing by translating Emma.
I think that's a wonderful account of the process, and once again, a testament to the idea that poetic justice can prevail, even if historic justice was not served appropriately, and the fact that it that this is a story that was not erased, that is in print. And I'd like also just to say kudos to Adriana and Rosemary, because both of their projects, their platforms, Hablemos, Escritoras, and Literal Publishing, disclosure there, I work with Literal, I co-edit the magazine. But they are projects that are dedicated to precisely ensuring that a greater awareness exists in the English-speaking world, in the United States specifically, but obviously beyond, as to Latin American issues, as to Latin American stories, as to the Latin American experience. And I do feel like we've had a diálogo de sordos, like what they say in Spanish, this idea of there's one side doesn't understand what the other is saying in the Americas for too long. And I applaud these continued efforts to bring the literature of Emma and of other magnificent authors to an English-speaking public. No, and I wondered, Emma, if you had any closing comments before we open the forum to questions from those who are here visiting.
Well, I like to really commend the fabulous work of Denise. I was very concerned about the translation of the novel, not only because of the theme, but as Denise explained, this is a very, very innocent, primitive, basic voice of a little girl that only went to school 3 years. So it's a very emotional prose, but at the same time, very close to her heart. I mean, she is walking through the pages of her diary and maturing as she's telling the story to the reader. So I was really concerned about how the translation could really reflect that changes of Ilse, the character. And I think Denise did just a brilliant work. I mean, I was reading the translation and I thought, oh, this is even a better book. She just did a fantastic work keeping that innocent voice of that little girl that is 50 years old, and she's still a little girl in her heart.
It's almost like a fairy tale, right? In a sense, and in the sense that fairy tales do speak to the ability of children to survive even the most adverse circumstances somehow. Well, thank you so much for bringing this book to us, for allowing us to experience this very trying story, but that is triumphant in the end, a story of survival, a true story of what goes on behind an apparently folkloric presence of a Colonia Dignidad in Chile. And now I'd like to hand it back to Adriana. I don't know if you'd like to accept questions from our audience, and Rosemary as well.
Yeah, what a great conversation. You are amazing. Let me tell you some facts that happen around the book, which I think that makes the story even better. Of course, Emma, she trusts our projects, no, for this translation, but she helped also to get the funding from the translation. She just sent me a message about the DIVRAC award, We were, I think that 2 weeks or less, 10 days before the closing of the call for papers. And Rosemary was traveling in a region with no internet. So I had to figure out at the beginning things. And Denise was very open to help and send all the information, all these documents or all the paperwork. And Emma was also very, very helpful. She was sending me messages all the time. Finally, we got Rosemary, and Rosemary and I put together the application. And the direct people they were amazing. They help us with the process, and of course, after that, silence. And you don't know anything about the award, the prize. You don't know who won or not. And finally, we got this fantastic email, and we were one of the five first books with the best notes and the best comments, and everybody was very, very happy with the presentation we put together about the book and about the translator, and of course the large trajectory that Emma has is very important. I am very honored that she accepted this, because she has been a long-time fighter for Hispanic rights in the United States, but also in Latin America. So she is a truly intellectual in modern times, with a foot in the United States, but the other one in her own country and her own region. And exactly the same happens with Patricia. And I really want to invite you to listen the conversations we have in Hablemos Escritoras with them. And of course, the sensibility, how Tanya, I knew that Tanya, we knew, Rose and I knew that Tanya was going to be perfect for Denise, because you speak the same language. But at the same time, you struggle with that concept of translation. What is translation? Translation is very complex, no? And on the other hand, and I'm going to pass because we have some questions from the public, but also I want to really focus on this. We are 6 women now in front of this Zoom, the cameras, talking about women, talking about Ilse, talking about these women that were trapped in a situation, and I think that we continue, doing the same. Women talking about women, and trying to put at the front of the conversation these very complex topics. This presentation will be on our YouTube channel, and also in Hablemos Escritoras website, on a Hablemos Escritoras website. But what I really need to put on this is we need to sell this book to everybody. We need to have this book in bookstores in the United States, in England, in the whole world. And also, we need to reach librarians to have the book in libraries. So that is very important. You can get the book in Amazon, you can get the book in Literal Publishing, and you can get the book through Hablemos Escritoras website. But we also, we need to recommend the book to make this possible. So Rose, I don't know if you want to add something to this. And by the way, Denise was so pregnant, right? Translating the book, she was like creating another baby. No, it was everything at the same time, with all the hormones and all the feelings that we women, that when we have babies, get in the craziness of producing a new life. And you had exactly the same in your hands, no? Producing a new life in English. We really want to reach the Anglo community. We are working so hard. Has been a long time doing this, working to make female writers visible in the Anglo community. Rose?
Well, I just want to add, I'm not very well aware of the time, but I just want to add that only 3% of the books read in the Anglo-speaking world are translations. So, I command and I invite all the readers to be aware of that fact and to try to read more literature that is written in other countries, because it really opens up our world, and also it's our responsibility as readers, to get more books and to support small publisher houses that are doing a huge effort to bring all these voices into the speaking the English speaking world. So I just wanted to add that, because it's during all these years that I've been in the publishing business, that 3% has not changed. So I invite everyone to support all these magnificent authors and magnificent translators, so that their work can get to be known.
I think we have two questions. Should I go ahead and read them maybe?
Yeah, exactly. If you want, we have two, and I think that somebody's. And yes, go ahead.
We have
Denise.
one from Christina Maxwini. Thank you so much for joining us, Christina. She says, congratulations, Emma, for this novel, and Denise for your brilliant translation. One thing that impressed me in this novel is how Ilse mostly never blames the other women for their decisions and choices. Was that an impression you gained from talking to survivors? And then I'm going to read Andrea's question too. She says, this story is rooted in a specific historical context, but it feels deeply relevant today. What connections do you hope readers make between Ilse's experience and the conversations we're having now about autonomy and control?
Very good. And by the way, Christina, thank you for supporting us always. Thank you. Thank you for the beautiful reading of the book, of Emma's book. Sorry.
Well, I'll start with the second one. I think it's very interesting because Ilse, it has that innocent way to look at the world, like I explained before. But I think, especially in United States, we still have the innocence that we, as females, we have seen terrible things happen in other countries, but in United States, women have fought for their rights. I'm totally with understanding their fights, but still living in the United States show me sometimes that the struggles that we had in South America were a lot more challenging. So maybe Ilse will open some eyes and it will make people wake up about what happened in the United States now and how women are losing their rights. I woke up a couple of days ago because I still read the news about the United States, and I was blown away when I read that there's a movement that they want to take away the rights of females to vote in elections. And I thought, this is part of that innocent. If they don't fight for the rights, they're going to lose everything that they have gained over the years. I was shocked that women in the United States, they don't have prenatal and postnatal care salary. I mean, if I come from a country where you stay home full salary before your child is born and after. So I hope that this will be a wake-up call to the many Ilses that are fighting for their rights in the United States in these difficult times.
And still, Christina's question is, what was that an impression you gained from talking to survivors? I noticed the same, that Ilse doesn't blame even her mother. There is a scene when the confrontation between them. I was waiting that she was going to say, you took me to this place, to this country, and she doesn't do that.
It's interesting. A lot of the people that I talked to, they were not angry. They were, and I don't know, it's because they had that belief that a lot of the things that happened to them was a way to get to some kind of a paradise, and one of the sentences that they had all over the place was silencio es fortaleza. Silence is going to give you strength. So I think they didn't blame anybody at one point, but as they were aware of what was going on outside Colonia Dignidad, they became more angry, and then they were upset about why their parents brought them there and all that. But I wanted to convey in the book that they were part of some kind of a sorority. Women were helping women. And I think in that space where they needed to survive every day, they were thinking about helping each other instead of blaming each other.
Yeah. Denise, do you want to read the next one from Brenda?
Sure. Brenda says, how does the story speak to the present? Do you see parallels between the abuses depicted in the novel and forms of violence that still persist today? And then we have another question along those lines from Marina Strisha. Given the recent election results in Chile with a far right-wing elected president, Gras, who has already reversed the expropriation of Colonia Dignidad, in your opinion, what would be the future of this colony in Chile? Do you have any hope that the present situation of Colonia Dignidad and its victims would change in the next few years under this government? Thank you.
Oh, I start with the first one this time. Yeah, I do see a tremendous parallel. The leader of the sect had index cards with details about the life of the politicians, some of the activists, some of the enemies of the government, and they had parties in there, and a lot of times very brutal things happen behind doors. So I do believe that the investigation of all those files have not gone deep enough, but we're going to find out that it's very similar to the Epstein files. The more that we investigate what happened there, especially during the 17 years of dictatorship, we're going to get some incredible news that deal with people that went there, that were filmed in inappropriate acts, and we're going to see that come to the surface. I do believe that is a huge parallel with a lot of impunity still, not only involving politicians, but people that were owners of some of the business that they had connections to Colonia Dignidad. I think this is just a really, really open subject. To respond that to Mar's question, I'm very skeptical. I think I've been followed all the Colonia Dignidad steps since the juicio and everything and then after the 80s and all that. I feel like we take 2 steps to the front and then 4 back. And I do believe that now, with the news that the expropriation is being stopped, we're going to see some difficult times ahead. I don't believe that we have to stay silent. I think we have to protest, and we need to force the government to at least continue with the expropriation, so we will have some kind of a Museo de Memoria or something that we can really teach the new generations what happened there so it doesn't happen again. I'm optimistic, yes. I'm optimistic because especially Chile and as you can see in Argentina, we have fought for so many fights that we thought we could never lose, and we prevail. So I do believe that Colonia Dignidad is going to still in the front row, and we're going to get a little bit of a justice one step at a time.
There's another question about a cinematic adaptation of the novel.
Yeah, it's a question by Samuel. Great talk. To Emma, can you imagine a cinematic adaptation of the novel?
Well, I think Samuel is the Spanish director from Valencia that we're working together. We already finished the script. It took us 2 years, and we already signed with a production company in Chile via X and Poison in Germany. And yes, we're moving along. And I hope, Samuel, that we can make the movie. The title of the movie is Ilse. And I hope that will be a reality in a short time.
That's exciting, something to look forward to. And then there's one question about the translation from Brenda. Was there a word, phrase, or passage that was especially difficult to translate, and why? I wouldn't say it was especially difficult necessarily, but there are lots of German words peppered throughout the book in Spanish, because of course everyone at the colony was speaking in German. And so sometimes it would happen that just because of the way the sentence was coming along, or the way someone was saying something, that whatever word appeared in German in the original in Spanish wouldn't really fit my translation in English. So what I would say or do was just, don't add that specific word in German, but instead try to recover that and use another German word elsewhere. And so it happened that I actually lived in Germany for a while when I was younger, and I studied German too. So I had some fun, let's say, trying to figure out what other words in German I could bring to the text in English that would make sense for the context. So I think that was sort of like another challenge that I didn't expect when I started working on this project.
Beautiful answer. We will take an extra couple of minutes before the closing, but I have a question for Patricia and for Tanya, if you allowed me. Do you have a scene that really caught your attention, shocked you when you read the book, Patricia and Tanya? Can you remember something specifically? This is a book of resilience. This is a book of surviving, but also this is a book can be, tough, not to read.
I mean, I think that it was very hard to read. And, I come from Argentina, and I read a lot of the books about what happened there during the military dictatorship. Just finished reading the book on Epstein. What Let's say that the whole book is difficult, but it's necessary. This whole book is necessary right now, because if we don't learn from what happened in the past and what's happened, and how governments in the United States, we had 6 administrations that did nothing with Epstein, and they're still doing nothing. Same thing with Chile, Argentina. Argentina's had better, What I liked about the book in the end is that she gets out. And it gives me hope that we can get out of the situation that we're in. We need to speak up. And I thank Emma for writing a book that is waking people up. I mean, this is a universal problem.
Yeah.
Why are we allowing people who commit these crimes to continue existing as if nothing happened? If we don't speak up, if we don't read these books, if we don't read the news about what really happened, then nothing happens. So thank you. So in answer to your question, I'm sorry I'm being very long-winded. What grabbed me the most was when she gets out. I'm like, oh, she's out. Thank God she's out.
Yeah. Tanya.
Yeah, and that's kind of a spoiler, but I think it is evident from the beginning that we are reading the story of a survivor, of somebody who manages to break free. And so I would agree with Patricia that you do feel like experiencing all of this horror with one degree of separation, as it were, is worthwhile in the end, because she does break free against all odds, all odds. I mean, there was absolute control of the perimeter, of information, of every aspect of their daily lives, and so it really is a testament to human resourcefulness and the spirit of liberty that she does break free. And so I would hardly agree with Patricia there. I think one of the things that affected me the most, because this is a novel of denunciation, is something similar that I see in many of these stories of sects, that I also, like Denise, I confess to a certain morbid interest and how these come about and how people end up involved in these sorts of organizations. But I think that a common thread that we see that I find particularly disturbing and that I think we must fight against with all of our resources and power and voices is how children are deprived of their most basic rights, and they didn't have any say in the matter. They were recruited into this system forcibly, kidnapped into the system. Not only the children from Germany, but children in Chile as well. And I think that to me is particularly horrendous because it's not even myself as an adult relinquishing all of my personal freedoms, but the fact that they never had a chance. They were brought into this at a very young age and never allowed to see that another kind of life is possible. And so for me, it's the shock of knowing that you can live in the 20th or the 21st century and still experience a reality that is from centuries past, and have be subjected to slavery, and in the middle of a republic, and not have any say in the matter, and so I think for me that's probably the most disturbing aspect. But again, I applaud the power of the arts, of literature, to break silences and to shed light on the darkest corners, in hopes that we can um, not only preserve memory, but take steps to prevent this from happening again. Because, as Patricia so rightly pointed out, we cannot take these freedoms for granted. They can be gone in a heartbeat, unfortunately, And so, thank you, Emma, once again for sharing this dark chapter and this hopeful ending with us. And thank you, Denise, for making it available to readers in the Anglo world. And also, I would like to say a lot of people, English is the second language that they read, and so I feel like it's ultimately a much broader audience.
And to that, I want to share my favorite scene too. It's early in the book actually, but it has to do with childhood. And I don't want to say too much because it is a big moment in the novel, and I don't want to spoil it for readers. But I'm just gonna say that the scene is about the last Christmas these kids celebrate at the colony, and I remember. It's one of the first scenes where I was like reading and I like had to cover my mouth with my hand in like shock at to at to what I was reading. So that she's like it comes early in the book and it really shows you sort of the extent of the things we're about to witness and to go through as we read through the pages of this novel. And in terms of the ending, which I agree is it's a story about resiliency and empowerment. There's also something that I appreciate in Emma's prose, that is that her freedom is also problematized in the book, because after, of course, so many years of living in this confinement, when she gets out, she's very lost. She doesn't understand what's happening. And I remember in one of the scenes where she's like in a plaza in Chile, and she sees other women like wearing trousers or holding hands with men, and totally normal things for everyone that they had never seen before, right? And so they're so happy on the one hand that they got out, but so scared as to what this new freedom might mean for them. And again, I think that's very well done. This is not like a fantasy book, like, oh, and everyone was happy in the end and they live happily ever after, right? And I appreciate that this is something that we have to keep an eye on. This is not something that we need to take for granted. This is things that we need to keep talking about and that we need to sort of continue making space for. So how that freedom comes about and what that freedom means for her as she goes back to Germany and as she, starts her own family are very well done in the prose, in keeping it sort of nuanced and problematized throughout. And I think that's also a great sort of asset of this book.
Fantastic. Let me just share something else, and we have to close. We are promoting and trying a new ways of promote this book. So all the followers, all the people that are watching now this presentation, don't miss our social media or our websites, because we are creating. We made a trailer. We are recreating images, with the words of Emma. And actually, I'm going to also we are going to leave you a link. So in our website or and YouTube website, you can watch also some teasers that we are creating to gain more attention of this book. Rosemary, do you want to close this presentation?
Of course, I just want to urge everyone to read When My Body Ceased to Be Your Home. And it's not such a magnificent work by Emma Sepúlveda and Denise Kripper, but it's good to read books like this because it confronts us with the terrifying reality of how easily authoritarian control and systemic misogyny can strip us of our autonomy. So the book is available in Amazon. The book is available in Hablemos Escritoras website, and the book is available through Literal Publishing. So I just want to everyone to read this book.
Thank you again, Emma. Congratulations. And thank you, Denise, for this beautiful translation. A big abrazo to Patricia and Tanya that accepted this invitation. This is fantastic. And thank you, Rosemary, for being always a cómplice on all these aventuras. Go to our website and spread the word. And thank you. Thank you for coming today to Hablemos Escritoras and Literal Publishing.